Good morning. Good to see everyone this morning. We are in the book of Joshua. Last week we finished up with chapter 15, and now we're starting to look at the distribution of the land. That's what started last week. I want to highlight one verse from the end of last week. Please notice Joshua chapter 15, verse 63. The army of Judah was not able to drive out the Jebusites, the ones who lived in Jerusalem. So the Jebusites still live among the people of Judah in Jerusalem to this day. That's a key idea. You're going to see it again as we go through the remainder of the study. All right, chapter 16 opens up with what could be described and is described as Joseph's inheritance. I want you to remember that Joseph ends up getting effectively the firstborn's portion because he gets a double portion. He gets one for Ephraim, one for Manasseh. And that is classically not the way it should have been, but that is the way it worked out. That's the way it plays out here in the text. So let's look at verses 1 through 4, that'll set the stage for us, chapter 16. The property that was assigned by lot to the sons of Joseph was received. It went out from the Jordan River near Jericho, and it continued to the waters of Jericho eastward toward the desert, which went up from Jericho to the hills of Bethel. Then it went out from Bethel to Luz, passing along the border of the Archites to the Ataroth. Then it went down west to the border of the Japhletites, and it continued to the border of lower Beth Horon and on to Gezer. The border ended at the Mediterranean Sea. So Manasseh and Ephraim inherited their lands. They were sons of Joseph. All right, they did inherit their land, but what you're going to observe is they basically get one large lot and they split it. That's the way it ends up being, and there's going to be later a complaint about that. Not surprising, because these people know how to complain. They've proven it all the way through the wilderness. They haven't really totally stopped as they enter into the promised land. So going forward from there, you'll notice the division of the territory. We're not going to read all of that, but I want to pick up now at verse 10. And notice what it says. But the Ephraimites could not force the Canaanites to leave Gezer. So the Canaanites still live among the Ephraimites today, but they became slaves of the Ephraimites doing forced labor. Now, I believe a lot of your translations probably say, drive them out. Is that right? Is that what you're seeing? Okay. This says, could not force them out. Same idea. I don't see any major distinction there. But the point is now, this is the second tribe concerning which it says they couldn't get them out. Now, why could they not get them out? Well, wait till you hear what Joshua has to say later to the 7 tribes who've not really, they've been lazy. They've not done anything about getting their land, and you'll begin to see what he at least thinks about that. Do what? Yeah, they want somebody else to do the work for them. That is not a bad way to describe it. Okay, the families of Manasseh, remember that's the other son of Joseph. The families of Manasseh begin to be listed now in chapter 17. But something unique happens with them. Pick up, if you will, at verse 3, and notice what it has to say about them at that spot. Now, Zealothat was the son of Hefer, the grandson of Gilead, the great-grandson of Machir, and the great-great-grandson of Manasseh. But Zealothat himself had no sons, only daughters. The names of his daughters were Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. These daughters went into the presence of Eleazar the high priest. They also went to Joshua the son of Nun and all the leaders. They said, the always present one commanded Moses to give us daughters a land inheritance, the same as our Hebrew male relatives. So Eleazar obeyed the always present one. He gave the daughters of Zealothat their land inheritance, just as Zealothat's male relatives received. All right, so the daughters. Now, what's this all about? Well, back up and you'll learn more about that. We're going to see it. Numbers talks about it. We want to particularly look at Numbers chapter 27. That's the first place to look. In Numbers 27, you'll find, of course, Moses is still the leader of God's people at that particular point in time. And beginning at verse 1, what happens? Then the daughters of Zelophehad, the son of Hepher, the son of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh, from the families of Manasseh, the sons of Joseph, and these were the names of his daughters. And here we go again, same list, right? Exactly the same. And they go to Moses and they make that request. And here's the way they do that. Let's pick up verse 2. And they stood before Moses, before Eleazar the priest, and before the leaders and all the congregation by the doorway of the tabernacle of meeting. Now, if they're by the tabernacle, whose presence are they in? They're in the presence of God. They're in the presence of the Lord. And that's very important. This request is not being dealt with just in human terms. It's being dealt with by the Lord. So here we go. Our father died in the wilderness, but he was not in the company of those who gathered together against the Lord in company with Korah, but he died in his own sin, and he had no sons. Why should the name of our father be removed from among his family because he had no son? Give us a possession among our father's brothers. So Moses brought their case before the Lord, and the Lord said to Moses, the daughters of Zelophehad speak what is right. You should surely give them a possession of inheritance among their father's brothers, and cause the inheritance of their fathers to pass to them. And you shall speak to the children of Israel, saying, if a man dies and has no son, then you shall cause his inheritance to pass to his daughter. And if he has no daughter, then you shall give his inheritance to his brothers. And if he has no brothers, then you shall give his inheritance to his father's brothers. And if his father has no brothers, then you shall give his inheritance to the relative closest to him in his family, and he shall possess it. And it shall be to the children of Israel a statute of judgment, just as the Lord commanded Moses. What book in the Old Testament follows that to a T? Ruth. You're looking for the Kinsman Redeemer, right? The one that has the right to the land. And so where'd they get that idea from? Well, it doesn't mention Kinsman Redeemer here, but it does mention that it stays within that family. And that's the key. And it doesn't matter how far you have to go out in the family to find somebody, before it's all over. You finally end up with the closest relative, whoever that might be, is in that place. All right, skip down to chapter 36. I don't want to belabor this point, but there's a little bit further explanation in 36. And the children of Israel present a reasonable problem before Moses, and that is dealt with in conjunction with what we've already had to say. And I think I put the wrong chapter number, naturally. No, it's it is 36, begin verse 1. Now the chief fathers of the families of the children of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh, of the families of the son of Joseph, came near and spoke before Moses and before the leaders of the chief fathers of the children of Israel. And they said, the Lord commanded my Lord Moses to give the land as an inheritance by lot to the children of Israel. And my Lord was commanded by the Lord to give the inheritance of our brother Zelophehad to his daughters. Now, if they are married to any of the sons of the other tribes of the children of Israel, then their inheritance will be taken from the inheritance of our fathers, and it will be added to the inheritance of the tribe into which they marry. So it will be taken from the lot of our inheritance. And when the Jubilee of the children of Israel comes, then their inheritance will be added to the inheritance of the tribe into which they marry. So their inheritance will be taken away from the inheritance of the tribe of our fathers. Then Moses commanded the children of Israel according to the word of the Lord, saying, what the tribe of the sons of Joseph speaks is right. This is what the Lord commands concerning the daughters of Zealothat, saying, let them marry whom they think best, but they may marry only within the family of their father's tribe. So the inheritance of the children of Israel shall not change hands from tribe to tribe, for every one of the children of Israel shall keep the inheritance of the tribe of his fathers. So that's very important. It's going to play a role later in the workings of the children of Israel. And so this is the daughters of Zealothat. Well, the remainder of the chapter pretty much goes along and lays out how this tribe receives, but then comes a complaint. I told you, they're pretty good at complaining. So look at verse 14, chapter 17, and let's see their complaint. Now the people from the tribes of Joseph, that'd be Ephraim and Manasseh, right? Okay. They said, you gave us an inheritance, only one area of land and one share of the land, yet we are so numerous. Up until now, the always present one has blessed us so much. Don't you look? There's some people that have a wonderful talent. And the talent is to praise, a part of it, but then complain, all in one big wad. And that's what they're doing here. God's blessed us so much, but you, see, not God, you, leader of God's people, Joshua, you've only given us one lot. We're a big bunch of people. We need more than one lot. Listen to the answer, because I believe this answer really applies to more than just this one set of two tribes. Now listen to what he goes on to say in response to them. And Joshua answered them, since you do have so many people, go up to the forest, clear a place for yourselves to live there. That is in the land of the Perizzites and the Rephaites. If the hill country of Ephraim is too small for you, the people of Joseph said, it's true, the hill country of Ephraim is not big enough for us, but the areas where the Canaanites live in the plains are dangerous. Those in Beth Shean and its villages, and those in the valley of Jezreel, they've got iron chariots. Now, by the way, if you study that historically, what they really had was chariots with wheels that had iron rims on them. And that makes them ride better as they go across the land, and so they're faster. So they're arguing, they got a way to beat us, and we're not strong. And listen, really, there is an unstated point here. We're not strong enough to beat them. Well, that's the problem, isn't it? Doesn't God really want us to recognize we're not strong enough? That we, standing alone, cannot do it? I think that's exactly what he wants us to recognize. And listen to Joshua as he continues, because he's really not through talking to them. Then Joshua spoke to the people of Joseph, to Ephraim and to Manasseh. He said, there's so many of you, and you do have great power, but you should not be given more than one share of the land. The hill country also belongs to you. Even though it is now a forest, you can cut down the trees, and it will be yours. And you will possess all of it, because you will drive the Canaanites out of the land. You can defeat them, even though they have iron chariots and they are strong. Now, if you go back, and Drew's already done a little bit of this, if you go back and read in Numbers chapter 14, what's the argument Joshua and Caleb make? We can't be beaten. If God's with us, nobody can beat us. So here along comes Joshua, and what's he saying? I'm not going to yield to your complaint because you can do this with God on your side. That's kind of the implication behind what he's saying. If God's on your side, you can do it. And so he doesn't yield to them. So that's an interesting ending, as it were, to chapter 17. So then, I do want us to notice one thing before we go any further, because we're about to talk about the tabernacle. Go back to Joshua chapter 14 and verse 15. We're really looking at the end of the verse in Joshua 14:15. And if I can get my pages to turn, we'll look at that together. Joshua 14:15. Then there was peace in the land. Seems like such a minor, almost an insignificant statement. You might read it and just almost blow by it, not even see it. Very short, very powerful. So they've got peace, so what happens? Well, here comes the explanation. It's time now for God to select a place for his name to dwell and the people to offer sacrifices to him. Turn to the book of Deuteronomy, if you would. And I'm going to speak to my typist. There's more I'll tell you about that today. My typist has had a bad week. There's no doubt about it. But look at this. We're going to look at Deuteronomy chapter 12. And particularly, we're going to look at verses 10 and 11. Not 10 or 12, 10, and 11 chapters. No. We're looking at chapter 12, verses 10 and 11. And here it is. But when you cross over the Jordan and dwell in the land which the Lord your God is giving you to inherit, and he gives you rest from all your enemies round about, so that you dwell in safety, then there will be a place where the Lord your God chooses to make his name abide. There you shall bring all that I command you, your burnt offerings, your sacrifices, your tithes, the heave offerings of your hand, and all your choice offerings which you vow to the Lord. This is one of the things that, the more I study it, the more I want to know, and I guess I like to ask when I get to heaven, did God really intend for the tabernacle or his dwelling place to always remain at Shiloh? Was that his intention? I'm not saying is that what ended up being the case. It did for a time. But ultimately, the children of Israel make a mess of things, per usual, and we'll see that Shiloh ceases to be the place where the tabernacle is. But it sounds like, from what Moses says, that God planned, really, to put his tabernacle there and abide there, and then to come there all the time. So, chapter 18, all the Israelite community gathered together at Shiloh. There they set up the meeting tent. The Israelites had control of that area. Okay, Shiloh. What does Shiloh mean? What does Shiloh mean? What does the word Shiloh mean? It's where the Ark of the Covenant and, of course, the tabernacle dwell. It means peace. Peace. If you listen, you can almost hear shalom. You can almost hear that word. They go together. They come from the same, basic root. So, or peace, or more especially rest. If you care for it more, that's the more defined word, rest. So why call it Shiloh? Well, the people now have rest. And God's having them set up his tabernacle because they have rest. You may want to notice, if you go back to the book of Genesis, when Jacob is blessing his sons, when he comes to Judah, he talks about the coming of Shiloh, the Messiah is going to be Shiloh. He's going to be our rest. That's what Jesus came to do, is to give all of us rest from sin. Okay, how long did the tabernacle stay at Shiloh? We're not going to go back and read all of this, but it stayed there until 1 Samuel chapter 4. And you may remember they're in a battle. They are worried about losing, and so they say, "Hey, get the Ark of the Covenant, and we'll beat them." And they take the Ark of the Covenant out on the battlefield, and what do? They promptly lose, and they lose the Ark of the Covenant. They lose them both in one battle. And so from that time forward, Shiloh is no longer the home of the tabernacle, no longer the home, really, of the Ark of the Covenant, because that's what is the significant thing. That's where the glory of God dwells, is on the Ark of the Covenant, on the mercy seat. That's where he dwells. So after the ark was captured, the city of Shiloh continues to deteriorate until finally it is conquered and destroyed by the Assyrians. And if you read that Psalm 78, 55 to 61, it's pretty clear. Tells all about it, exactly how that happened. Jeremiah talks about it as well. So, having set up the tabernacle, the next order of business is for Joshua to do a little discipline. Watch him now as he picks up verse 2. But there were still 7 tribes of the Israelites that had not yet shared in the land inheritance. So Joshua said to the Israelites, "Why do you wait so long to capture your land? The always present one, the God of your ancestors, has given this land to you. Each tribe must choose 3 men. I'll send them off to map out the territory. They'll write a description of it so that I can divide up your land inheritances. Then they will come back to me to report. Then they will divide up the land into 7 parts. The people of Judah will stay within the borders in the south. The people of Joseph will stay within their borders in the north. However, you tribes should divide up the land into 7 parts. Describe the 7 parts in writing." So what's the problem? As Mr. Bob already said, they're lazy. They expect God to just give it to them, you know. And this is one of the things that sometimes there's a thing in debate, they call it the Law of Unintended Consequences. And when you start giving people money for doing nothing, guess what? They're going to do nothing. You just incentivize them to do nothing. And ultimately, that's not good. It wasn't good for these people. And that's the reason that Joshua chides them because of it. Now, the land is divided. It's important to see that as the land is divided, something very interesting happens. Verse 10, "Then at Shiloh, in the presence of Yahweh, Joshua picked lots for them to apportion the land that should be distributed to each tribe of Israel according to their divisions." Yes, I know they chose it by lot. That is a selection process. I hesitate to compare it to anything that we have, because you're going to think gambling and stuff, and it's not gambling at all. Why not? It's in the presence of the Lord. The point is that as they divide the land, they want to do it God's way. That's the point. And that's very, very clear, because they do the division in the presence of the Lord. In fact, Holcroft said the lots determined which of the 7 portions a tribe would be allotted, but the presence of the Lord suggests there was a definite providential guidance. And that's, you see that in another place. Do you remember when, now casting lots, the closest thing we got to it is throwing dice. So, for example, just think about it this way. Let's say, Dale, that you and I are going to decide who's going first. We're going to play a game of some sort. So we take up 1 die, and here's our agreement. The man that throws the highest number starts first. So Dale throws a 6 and I throw a 1. Who's going first? Dale is. See? It's like that. And I hesitate, again, it's not gambling. No gambling involved here. Why? Because God is providentially guiding it. Is there another case in Scripture where a lot is cast and apparently God is behind providentially moving the cat? Or what is it? What now? Oh, well, Matthias, good. You're in Acts chapter 1. That's a good choice. Yes. When Matthias is chosen, they obviously pray to the Lord. They want the Lord to work this out. There, his providence is more clearly mentioned, actually. What about the book of Jonah? Everybody on the ship wants to know, well, who's responsible for us being in this terrible storm? Because they didn't believe storms happen by accident. And they cast the lot, and who does the lot fall on? The exact right fella. I have a suspicion that God is behind that. You may not agree with me, but that's my inclination, that God is behind that. And they ask him, why? Why is God mad at you? And he says, well, I fled from the God who made heaven and earth, and he's mad at me. And they just back up in horror. How could you do that? Disobey the God who made heaven and earth. And they said, well, what are we going to do about it? And he said, just throw me overboard. Of course, they didn't even want to do that. They had more concern for him, and their lives are in jeopardy because of him. They have more concern for him than he has for the children of the city of Nineveh. Isn't that sad? I think it is. But there's another casting of the lot that we could describe there. Okay, so he begins to give shares. I'm not going to read every share. I don't want anybody to go to sleep yet. Wait till my sermon. But at any rate, as you keep reading on down, you'll discover a few things. One is in chapter, I'm getting 18:16, and notice what it has to say. Then the border goes down to the bottom of the mountain that is near the valley of Ben Hinnom, which is north in the valley of Rephaim. The border goes down to the Hinnom Valley, just south of the Jebusite city, and on down to En Rogel. Okay, the valley of Hinnom ought to be a tip-off. We're talking about Jerusalem, is what we're talking about. And the Jebusite city is what eventually will become Jerusalem. David, as we, I think, discussed last week, David will drive them out, finally, of that area, but these people don't drive them out. They let them stay there, and they live among them. The temple eventually is therefore erected in a city that really belongs to Benjamin. I mean, technically. It's given to Judah, I understand that, but it really belonged to Benjamin. If you watch the division of the land, the portions that we're talking about. There is a Bethlehem that is mentioned here, but it's not the one you're thinking about. It's really the city of Bethlehem is what it really is. And that is in just east of Mount Carmel. Of course, remember, Mount Carmel's on the sea, so it'd be hard to be west of Mount Carmel unless you're going to live in the Mediterranean Sea. So it's east of Mount Carmel is where it's located. All right. Look at verses 49 and 50 of chapter 19. It's just more division to each group. And you can notice each one there. Benjamin's share is in chapter 18. Simeon's share is in 19. Zebulun's share, Issachar's share, Asher's share, Naphtali's share, Dan's share. And then finally, after everybody gets their share, then watch. Verse 49 of chapter 19. When the Israelite leaders finished distributing the various territories of the land inheritances to the people of Israel, gave to Joshua the son of Nun a land inheritance which was among them. They gave to Joshua the town which he asked for just as Yahweh had commanded. You know, we don't have any reference to that. What's that? It is, yes. And it's an insignificant, I mean, it's really a very small city. And what Bob said is, that's all he asked for, was this one little city, insignificant, you know, not a lot of meaning to it. What I want to zero in on is this. We know that God promised Caleb a place. We've already talked about that last week in chapter 14 particularly. But it looks like God also promised Joshua a place. And we didn't know that until we got right here. And all of a sudden we find out God promised Joshua just like he promised Caleb. That's not too surprising. Both of them are great faithful men, and it's noted here. Okay, what we want to see is a statement that Holcroft made, and listen to this carefully. In all the allotment, it was not necessarily true that the assigned land had been conquered. What was given was the territory that the tribe could expect to control if they involved the Lord's enabling to conquer and populate these portions. In the outworking of events, the tribes tended definitely to fall short of God's intended provision for them. If you think about the book of Hebrews, one of the big points that the writer of Hebrews makes is that the reason they failed to enter rest, we're talking about those people that died in the wilderness, was because they didn't obey God. They didn't follow what he said. Well, you come here, and guess what? They're just repeating history. They're failing to do what God's already promised them. You can have it. I'll help you. But they don't seize that opportunity, and therefore they don't get all of what they could have gotten. Okay, briefly, go with me back to Numbers chapter 35. We'll look at Numbers 35 because it sets the stage partly for what we're about to deal with. That's not the last, but the second to the last chapter in the book of Numbers. And what we want to do is pick up at verse 9. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you cross the Jordan into the land of Canaan, then you shall appoint cities to be cities of refuge for you, that the manslayer who kills any person accidentally may flee there. They shall be cities of refuge for you from the avenger, that the manslayer may not die until he stands before the congregation in judgment." Now think about this a minute. We used to recognize that some people are killed accidentally. And we usually call that manslaughter. It's not murder because it was an accident. Now, what could you do if you accidentally killed someone? You know what's going to happen. His family's going to come after you. If you're out working with a friend in the forest, you're chopping trees down with an axe, which probably isn't done very much anymore, but you're chopping trees down with an axe, and the axe head flies off and strikes the other fellow. It's a sharp axe head, strikes him in the neck, and it cuts him, and he bleeds to death right there. Okay, that's an accident. Anybody can see that, right? That doesn't mean that his family isn't going to want to kill me if I'm the one who did it. They're going to want to kill me. So what's the answer? Well, the answer is go to the city of refuge. Now, I'm still going to have to stand trial. And that's very important to see. It's not indiscriminate. Just anyone that kills someone cannot go there and expect to live. If you murdered somebody, you're not going to live. Yeah. It's a dangerous thing. So it's very important to see that. Okay. He goes on then and says in verse 13 of Numbers 35, "And the cities which you give, you shall have 6 cities of refuge. You shall appoint 3 cities on this side of the Jordan, and 3 cities you shall appoint in the land of Canaan, which will be cities of refuge. These 6 cities shall be for refuge for the children of Israel, for the stranger, and for the sojourner among them, that anyone who kills a person accidentally may flee there. You know what? Even a foreigner might accidentally kill somebody. Let's say a foreigner comes in, and he may even be allowing himself to be enslaved for a short time to kind of buy his way into freedom in the land of Israel. He might accidentally kill his temporary owner, might accidentally do that. What does he do? Well, the city of refuge is for him too. He's a foreigner, but if he lives in the land of Israel, it's there. Now remember, they're still going to have a trial. God's not just an indiscriminate God. He doesn't work that way. So very important to see that. But if he strikes him with an iron implement so that he dies, he is a murderer. The murderer shall be put to death. Now see, that's a difference. Not the head of the axe flies off and strikes the guy and he bleeds to death. No, if I take the axe and crack him right over the head and he dies, I'm a murderer. I did it on purpose. Not very hard to determine that, is it? And that's what they will do. And if he strikes him with a stone in the hand by which one could die, and he does die, he is a murderer. The murderer shall surely be put to death. Or if he strikes him with a wooden hand weapon by which one could die, and he does die, he is a murderer. The murderer shall surely be put to death. The avenger of blood himself shall put the murderer to death. When he meets him, he shall put him to death. And if he pushes him out of hatred, or while lying in wait, hurls something at him so that he dies, or in an enmity he strikes him with his hand so that he dies, the one who struck him shall surely be put to death. He is a murderer. The avenger of blood shall put the murderer to death when he meets him. However, if he pushes him suddenly without enmity, or throws anything at him without lying in wait, or uses a stone by which a man could die, throwing it at him without seeing him, so that he dies while he was not his enemy, or seeking his harm, then the congregation shall judge between the manslayer and the avenger of blood according to these judgments. Okay, so he goes on, guess what they did? Well, while on the east side of the Jordan, which belongs to the 2.5 tribes, they set up 3 cities of refuge. Now, they're in the land of promise. Everybody's got their land. What do? They set up 3 cities of refuge. And that's what we're talking about when we get to this chapter. 3 cities are chosen on the west side of the Jordan. And Holcroft makes this observation. Every Israelite lived a comfortable distance from one of them, about 80 kilometers or 50 miles, being the greatest distance. That's the furthest anybody had to go. And, if I'm fleeing for my life, I think I can go that far. I think I'm going to make it. Some way, somehow, I'm going to make it. So God set that up. By the way, even the roads had signposts that pointed clearly, city of refuge, this way. Very, very clearly laid out, so that nothing is going to hinder the manslayer from getting to the city of refuge where he will have his trial. And we'll find out whether he's just a manslayer or he's a murderer, whichever the case may be. Chapter 21. So chapter 20 is the cities of refuge. I'm not going to name all those, but you can see those laid out in that chapter. Chapter 21 is the cities of the Levites. And they are given to the Levites at the commandment of the Lord. Look at the opening of the chapter. The leaders of the fathers of the Levites approached to talk to Eleazar, the high priest. They also spoke to Joshua, the son of Nun, and to the leaders of the fathers of all the other tribes of the sons of Israel. This occurred at the town of Shiloh in the land of Canaan. The leaders said, through Moses, Yahweh commanded that you give to us Levite towns where we may live. And he commanded that you give us pastures for our animals. So the Israelites obeyed this commandment of the always present one. The Israelites gave some towns and pastures to the Levite people out of their own land inheritances. And really, chapter 21 is all about that. Cities given to the Levites. If you want to go back again, Numbers 35, it details out that's supposed to happen. It's laid down pretty clearly. The Kohathites received 23 towns, 13 for Aaron's descendants, and 10 for the rest. The Gershonites were assigned 13 towns, and the Merarites were given 12 towns. The combined tribes of Judah and Simeon gave up 9 towns. 8 other tribes each gave up 4 towns. Naphtali, or Naphtali as I usually say it, gave up 3, and each of the 2 halves of Manasseh gave up 2. For the Levites to be so thoroughly dispersed meant that no Israelite was more than about 16 kilometers or 10 miles from a Levite. That's kind of nice. Why is that important? Well, for various reasons. The Levites help people in reference to their worship to God. And here they're able to be close to them, and they can learn the teaching of God on whatever it is that is of concern to them. All right, now I want to zero in on the last few verses. Look at chapter 21, verse 43. And in my Bible, new as it is, I took my favorite highlighter and I have marked the last few verses. Listen to why. It's going to be very clear. So the always present one gave to Israel all the land of Canaan, which he vowed to give to their ancestors. Now, why do I bring this up? Brethren, there are people out there right now that are going to tell you Israel never got all the land. They didn't get the whole promise. And that's why Jesus is going to come back and he's going to set up a place on earth. And he's going to rule on earth because they've got to get their land. Joshua says God kept his promise. They got everything he promised. And you might say, wait a minute. You just said a little while ago that they didn't drive all the Canaanites. Yeah, that's right. Remember, a covenant with God involves 2 things: promises and conditions. He promised them the land on the condition that they drive the people out. Notice how many times Joshua said they did not drive them out. And because they didn't drive them out, they didn't get all the land. But that doesn't mean God didn't keep his promise. It means the people didn't meet their condition. All right, keep going. After they took possession of it, the Israelites settled in it. The always present one permitted the Israelites to have peace on all sides of Canaan, according to what he had sworn to their ancestors who lived long ago. None of their enemies could withstand them. The always present one put all their enemies into their hands. Yahweh kept every promise that he had made to the Israelites. Each one came true. It is. Verse 45, Mr. Bob says, is a very strong verse. And it ought to be something that stands out to us. Why should it stand out to us? Every promise God made came true. Has that ceased to be true? You can nod your head this way. Never fails. He never fails. If I don't go to heaven, whose fault will it be? Well, it won't be God's. It'll be mine, right? That's exactly, and it's okay. Miss Lyda pointed to me. I said me, so that's who, and then you pointed to you. I saw it. That's correct. Okay, so I know that's a lot of territory to cover. Hopefully you read that material on your own. You need to keep reading a lot and there's not a lot left in Joshua, by the way. We're at chapter 21. It only goes to chapter 24. So go ahead and read the rest of Joshua, and we'll continue next week in our study of this tremendous book of Joshua. Okay. Yes. Okay. Mr. Bob has just given me an assignment for next week's class, so we'll come to it next week. Verse 5, chapter 22.